coming week. I have old family, I have new family, here. And Bill, if I need a divorce, he's my attorney for that. It's so wonderful to have all of you here. I was talking to Lisa, our town clerk, and it's been 10 years since we've had a joint meeting. So probably the only two people that were you and me the last time that we had it. Okay, well, maybe Bill. I was trying to forget that. But other than that, it's really wonderful to have everybody here working on things that we work on collaboratively together. Tonight's invocation will be given by Vice Mayor Egbert, followed by the pledge led by all of us. So at this time, Vice Mayor. Sorry.
Our eternal Heavenly Father, we are grateful for this opportunity to meet as community leaders, and we begin our meeting in praising thy greatness and preserving our freedoms and prosperity in this country. We are grateful for thy ever-watching hand. We pray for our military and first responders to remain safe as they serve our country, state, and community. Heavenly Father, we pray for peace and wisdom for our country during this upcoming election, and we seek thy direction and understanding tonight as we meet as community leaders. We pray for those that are struggling and those with fear, that they can find those that can help them to find peace and comfort. We ask these things in thy Savior's name, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks, everybody. And we'll begin with a roll. Madam Clerk, for the town side, please.
Councilmember Bracco. Here. Councilmember Davis. Here. Councilmember Gillespie. Here. Councilmember Morales. Councilmember Priolo. Here. Vice Mayor Egbert.
Here.
Mayor Murphy.
Here.
Quorum present.
Thanks. And the acting president this evening, Denise Reese, Sherry's out of town. If you could call your roll, please.
Board member Here. Board member
That's okay.
CFO was that here? Assistant Superintendent Scott Downs? Here. Assistant Superintendent Darlene Robinson? Present. Assistant Superintendent Brett Bonner?
Here. You brought everybody. Thank you. I appreciate it. We'll begin, Madam Clerk, with item number 5.
Sahuarito Police Department SPD presentation and discussion regarding current Student Resource Officer SRO intergovernmental agreements and newly developed school policy to aid the SPD, Sahuarito Unified School District, and other involved parties with the SRO program and policing incidents.
Thank you. We'll begin with Dr. Valenzuela to do an overview, but I kind of wanted to set the table. I had to put a smile on my face a few days ago when Dr. Valenzuela's growing magazine over the years, we didn't even have one many, many years ago, named Sahuarito Wins, which I had the great honor of actually starting with Dr. V, and I totally forgot about this morning's meeting, so I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. And then I had to occasionally, or also smile because his picture was with our Sahuarito sign. So I just thought that sort of said what these two particular items I think are unique in so many ways of us working together, that we share resources, we share money, we share personnel, both on the SRO and on the Park and Rec. Shared fields perspective that's been going on many years. I actually don't remember how many years, but I remember it started at ANSA when Dr. St. John, I think, was the superintendent. It was a long time ago. But I thought this was, it's really more of a presentation and quasi sort of work study where we, again, after 10 years, we're together. We literally are connected by Sahuarito Road and our sign from there. So I thought it was important that, at least once every 10 years, or earlier maybe, when things are updated, that we can get together and have that discussion. So, Dr. V, if you wanted to, if you wanted to go up there, and I think the clicker is up there, right, Mark?
Yes, it is.
Thanks.
Already. I hope it's simple. Yeah, you went to the-
There you go.
Well, first of all, thank you so much to the Reverend Body of local town and the school district for your agreement to come together. I think symbolically it sends a message that really reflects who we are, which is a community that really values the importance of working together. I know that today a big part of the conversation is going to be about regarding the area of operations and school safety. And I want to stress this is our plan. It's called SUSD 2020. Sometimes people say, well, 2020, that was a bad year, that's past. But really, it's really about the ocular version of having clear vision. And the first one that's listed there is, in fact, safe and supportive environment. So I just briefly want to give a short overview, because I know we have multiple speakers and things to talk about. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about how we view Of course, thank you. So that was just my normal loud voice. Not being asked. Thank you
Well,
very
you have a
much.
principal and teacher voice.
That's
so,
right. No, thank you for that. I just wanted to kind of create a little bit of a visual to highlight a couple things. One is, as a school district, it's no coincidence that safe and supportive schools is direction one, number one. If you're not creating safe and supportive environments, nothing else really matters. So it is at the top. The other thing I wanted to point out from how we've framed and how our board has conceptualized this, really the work we do has three prongs. And the last thing I'd ask you to just keep in mind in the next 2 or 3 minutes while I talk is that multiple of these bullet points, multiple initiatives that we have are formally or informally connected with the relationship that we share with the town of Sahuarita. And that's not something to be taken for granted, because I was talking with Councilmember Bracco as he prepares to exit after many years of service to the council, and I tell him, well, you know, this is my 36th year as a public school educator in this state, and we cannot take for granted the value of this kind of trust, this kind of relationship, which we have. So keeping that in mind, I'm just going to highlight a few things. Our first area of focus in the area of safety is in programs and education. So, you know, we're fortunate we have school counselors in every school, largely through the support of our local community investing and saying, this is a priority. We have a national competency-based guidance model. We have a national behavior intervention support to our school culture model. Right now, we are currently in the process of implementing a national model originated out of the University of Virginia called the Comprehensive School Threat Assessment Guidelines, CSTAG, which we're doing in partnership with the Sahuarita Police Department, so that we have common language in how we deal with these kind of situations and supports. And our school resource officer program, I'm very proud of the fact that, you know, it's been great to see a lot of the growth that's transpired through the investments of many people. On this particular one, I remember when I first met Chief John Nolan when he was shortly arrived here from Santa Rosa, California, and he talked about his experiences and his familiarity with school resource officers and how they have the potential to add value in terms of law enforcement visibility, law enforcement practice, and also the development of a strong rapport and visibility within the school community. I had that same experience in my role as an educator. So we started from scratch to kind of build this program, and we now have 4 school resource officers that are visible and working in our schools, and I think for the greater good of our community. So that's programs. Physical environment. This has a lot to do with the type of environment that we have in our communities. And it's not just about the hardening of schools or some of the things you think about. You know, it's things that we've done as we've built schools like Copper View, Wrightson Ridge, to look at even how you create vegetation, and how you orient the walls to create the type of feeling tone where mentally people want to be. It's welcoming, it's nurturing. But it is also about the physical things you do, like access control, and how we require, I don't have mine right now, but my ID card, to buzz you in before you get into a school, and how you put perimeter fencing, or some of these newest tools that were just deployed this summer. Those state-of-the-art cameras that we have, I'm telling you, I don't use the term state-of-the-art lightly. They are. I mean, Manny Villas here, our Chief Information Officer, these things have better resolution than I think most of our televisions, right, Manny? I mean, and with the competencies and the capabilities, it really is state-of-the-art. Another one that we've been in the process of putting in is this bullet-resistant glass, this ballistic-resistant, riot-resistant glass. You know, it's sad that we have to go down that road, but the way I frame it is we need to deploy whatever tools we have available, from education to the physical environment, and this is one tool that we've put into place to mitigate the risk in our school community, and we're grateful that our community has said, we want to make this investment. But the reason I mentioned that one as well is this was done, this was deployed, this was planned through the collaboration with the Sahuarita Police Department and their people. I remember specifically Scott walking around with, I guess now retired Commander Caleb Allred, and walking around looking at windows and kind of strategizing the value of this product and consulting and giving professional advice, and also strategically formatting the placement. So you can see they're putting some of that film in there. So physical environment, program, into education. And the last one is this tactical cooperation. You might have seen the news story of the simulation that came out on the news with one of our school resource officers, Officer Alan Guest, affectionately known as Big Al, that where they were doing a simulation. He was like disarming this individual who was like the bad guy. But you know, one of my coaches when I was in sports used to say, you play the way you practice. And so that practice part, that real life tactical cooperation in simulation, but also in cooperation, in communication. I know Amber Woods is here, our Chief Communications Officer, and how we cooperate on how we communicate. Because you know what? We're serving the same community. And so we need to do it together, and in doing so, we will do it better. You know, unfortunately, we've had some real life situations where we've put into practice how we manage incidents, how we communicate, how we collaborate, how we logistically and operationally move people around and act to keep people safe. And it's really affirming to me and comforting to know that we don't walk alone, that we walk together with our respective skill sets, resources, talents, energies, and shared commitment to our mission of safe and supportive school environment. So program, education, physical environment, tactical cooperation. I extend my gratitude for what has always been, as long as I've been here, the way we do things here in Sahuarita is as a team, as we call it, the Sahuarita Wins Way. And my gratitude is extended to all of you for your shared vision, your shared commitment, and dedication to making sure that as we go forward, we always have our foot on the gas, full speed, to continue to improve, to develop, and to grow in this mission of student success, which starts with keeping students safe and well. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dr. V. And, you know, thanks to the principals for their cooperation. I remember participating in the active shooter drill out in Walden Grove, and boy, when you hear sounds go off and they're bouncing off of walls and hallways, it's, you know, the adrenaline. Everybody knew it was a practice, but, you know, the officers were out of breath. They were laboring, you know, because they were taking it seriously, because hopefully never, but if there was another incident, understanding how difficult to pin down where these sounds are coming from when they're bouncing off of concrete walls and brick and everything. So I think it obviously makes us a safer place when we have these opportunities to work together. Before I turn it over to our side, Denise, did you want to, I apologize, I meant to have you go first before you introduce Dr. Valenzuela, but are you good? Yeah. Okay, thank you, I appreciate it. Beth, did you want to start off? Beth took the point from our town side. If you wanted to make any comments, then we can turn it over to Chief Nolan for his presentation, if you like.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm Beth Abramovitz. I'm the Assistant Town Manager, and PD is one of the departments that reports to me. So from the very beginning of this exercise, I was kind of the point person for this. And kind of like, if you've ever been to those movies that start with the big climatic scene and work backwards, well, I'm going to do that a little bit. And Chief's going to talk to you more in depth about some of the items in the policy, but I wanted to take a second and read something to you out of the policy, out of our purpose and scope, for why we did this. And it says, in addition to establishing guidelines for conducting school-related criminal investigations, this policy aims to protect the welfare and privacy of students by implementing procedures that reduce disruption to their educational environment and maintain a supportive school atmosphere. By enhancing collaboration between law enforcement and school officials, the policy seeks to facilitate a balanced approach that addresses safety concerns while safeguarding the well-being of students and preserving the integrity of the school community. So how did we get there? So a number of months ago, I guess already at this point, actually CESD approached the mayor and asked if he could have a meeting with the manager and myself to go over some concerns. And at that meeting, they did express a number of concerns and issues that they had with how PD conducts essentially arrests of minors on campus. So the chief and I ended up going to CESD and sitting down with staff and having a very lengthy discussion with them. And I actually went back through my notes to find, some of their concerns that they had shared with us, that things that they really wanted to see a policy, something that they could see and touch and share with their administrators and their teachers and their counselors, so that when something happened at the school, they could go back to it and say, oh yeah, that's the way it was supposed to be done, everything was handled accordingly, or here's where we have discretion, here's where we don't. And some of the concerns that they had shared with us is that they had wanted a policy to provide clear, standardized procedures for arresting minors to help ensure consistency and fairness across the different cases, the schools, and school districts. They felt that young people were particularly vulnerable to physical and psychological harm, and they requested that we look at ways to help mitigate risks and ensure that any arrest is conducted in a manner to minimize potential trauma. They wanted us to recognize that the school is responsible for the general safety of the students and to ensure that appropriate school personnel are informed of actions affecting students. They wanted a policy to provide clear guidance, especially for new SROs or for officers who aren't SROs who might respond to a school event, on items that are within their discretion versus what is a mandatory requirement. And also to limit, wherever possible, non-school related arrests, questioning, etc. on school property. So I just wanted to provide you all that with a little bit of the how did we get to where we are today. And so I'm going to pass on to the chief now to talk about the actual policy and what's in it at this point.
Thanks, Beth.
Thanks.
Chief?
I'm going to start off finding the clicker here in a minute. But saying I'm very proud of the Sahuarita Police Department, and I'll take a lesson from my mom. Never let hubris force you into a mistake. The Sahuarita Police Department is a great police department. Been doing this business now for 40 years. I've seen departments well run and poorly run. I've worked for 9 chiefs of police before I became a police chief. And believe it or not, when I became a corporal, I was watching chiefs and how they did stuff. And with the exception of one, I worked for 8 very good police chiefs. And then I worked for one that taught me what not to do in multiple areas. But with that, I won't let hubris be my enemy here. Everybody is capable of making a mistake. Myself, the Sahuarita Police Department, any school district, any business, etc. So I think the important part is trying to learn from different points where we can. But I will say that I'm very proud of our police department. I'm proud of our SRO program. I'm proud of each of our SROs. I see multiple members of my command staff here tonight, so thank you all. I'm hoping, Dr. V, I can do this as well as you did and hit to the right. I believe this is the part where I get to refer to my notes because I have a habit of going on and on.
You just
So-
talked that about me, not about you, Steve.
I'll try to stay on script here. So, good evening. I'm glad we have the opportunity to meet and provide some perspectives on our SRO program between the town and the Sahuarita Unified School District. If possible tonight, I'd like to present by way of this PowerPoint. And then I will gladly take on questions afterward. So with that, I believe this, did I just advance the slide?
No.
Okay, that's good news. So as you may be aware, the town and SUSD have had at least one SRO assigned to the schools for over a decade. Over the last 10 years, we have progressed from one SRO to a full SRO program, which currently has 4 SROs. Dr. V, I remember you helping interview me for this position, and we talked about program. And a program takes more than one individual. So here we are. With that, one of our SROs is working at Sahuarita High School and another one at Walden Grove High School. The IGAs primarily outline the funding responsibilities, work schedules, and that approximately 80% of an SRO's time will be spent at their assigned campus. The IGAs also outline the expectations that SROs will provide a certain number of classroom instructional hours. This is an important element of a quality SRO program. It puts students in non-enforcement settings with officers. The IG also defines roles for an SRO to play during summer school session or a session or multiple sessions. The other 2 SROs share duties among Anza Trail, Wrightson Ridge, and Sahuarita Middle School. I may make the mistake later tonight saying the K through 8 schools. I believe 2 of those are K through 8. But with that, the town and the SUSD have 2 separate IGAs connected to the 3 SRO positions. This means SUSD and the town each pay a portion of each of these positions, these 3 positions. During the last school year, the police department recognized a consistent trend associated with frequency and complexity of different school incidents. This is why, after discussion with Dr. V and obviously my staff before that, I assigned additional SRO to assist with our 2 K through 8 schools in Sahuarita Middle School. We had 1 SRO handling all that, and the workload was significant. It was too much. So I took an officer from patrol and assigned him to the SRO position. This is not to say that the schools are unsafe. We have safe schools. Yay, that's fantastic. There's a lot of places that don't have the safety and the security, and quite frankly, the dedicated teachers and staff that our folks, our students have here. So we do have safe schools. We recognize where there's an additional SRO, we recognized that it would be helpful in areas connecting with students to provide them more classroom instructional time. These are the hours they spend with students when it's not enforcement. They're teaching, they're instructing, they're mentoring, they're guiding students. So this is a great part of the program. In February and March of this last year, Beth, you were talking about how this began. So I began contemplating the need for a schools policy related to school investigations and arrests. Examining the need for new policies or updating prior policies is something that every chief does, and often does not have a connection with any external request or stimulus. However, shortly after this time period, we did receive questions associated with some of the processes, procedures, and actions by officers at some of our schools. Beth just spoke about this a little bit. This accelerated, and the conversations began, and process for developing a schools policy started to take place. This was connected to investigations, reporting, and arrest. These actions occurring at schools are not new. However, a policy can help officers respond with consistency in order to have a better quality outcome. Our schools policy and process include the following steps. So, as I do with every police department policy and development, I include perspectives other than my own. We gather different perspectives and information and collaborate with other entities. In this case, I received input from town management and officials, SUSD, CESD, SPD command staff, school resource officers, who are the ones that actually do the work at the schools, the SRO sergeant, who actually supervises our SROs, a juvenile court prosecutor, and of course, the requirements of the law. I'm not, and I hope you're not surprised when this type of collaboration and input creates different perspectives. It certainly does. This is common with this type of process, but I think we actually get a better product from it when we do it this way. In this case, the process and development of this policy included significant listening. I called it a listening tour of our involved parties and partners. This policy went through several drafts. The drafts were sent out to different partners to allow them to review the drafts and then provide me with comments. And I did receive comments from Superintendent Rico as well as Dr. V. Thank you both. The development of this policy took multiple months. In anticipation of the new school year, which began August 5th of this year, I finalized the policy and I issued the policy on July 10th. This was done in order to have the policy in place and allow our officers multiple weeks to review the policy, understand the policy, come back, ask for clarifications or with questions they may have, trying to get rid of the different issues that might pop up when you roll out a new policy. This is common in police work. This would allow us that time that allowed the staff to take it in and then figure out how to implement it. When developing policy, I strive for a policy that meets our local needs and is reasonably easy to understand and employ. Remember, officers can pull up a policy on their smartphones, look at it, and dig down into it. But the bulk of a policy should be fairly easy to understand, and officers should be able to review it, or I should say, recall it from their memory, saying, I know I'm supposed to do this, I'm not supposed to do this other thing, and here's who has to be informed, that type of stuff. So I refer to this policy as a policy that meets SPD best practices. When we do not have a policy that clearly directs staff, we get inconsistency and sometimes disparate treatment. I believe this policy helps address inconsistent decision-making and treatment. I'll also state that policies change over time as we continue to learn. This slide presents an overview of our police department's school policy. One of our primary goals is to clearly conduct fair, balanced, objective, and thorough investigations. This means taking the time necessary to get the information that is reasonably available to us. This includes checking in with school staff so we better understand the incident. School staff can advise us on some of the issues that may not normally come out during an investigation. I'm going to add here that there have been, I don't know how many times, I'm going to lose track of fingers and toes here, when I have been able to call Dr. V 24/7, 365 and have a frank conversation with him on different issues. Sometimes it's the tragic loss of one of our students in our community, one of our youth, and there's a lot of coordination that needs to go together. Other times it's a criminal matter. Other times it's something fairly simple, but the logistics behind it, both at SUSD's end and our end, are important to get right. And I know my commanders have reached out, Manny, to your number twos, to Brett and Scott, and you're incoming now, thank you. And have those conversations as close to real time as possible in order to problem solve in advance. An additional goal of ours is to provide consistent, fair, and respectful treatment of all involved parties, whether we call them a victim, a suspect, a witness, or what is a common fourth category, an involved other. They're somehow involved in an incident. So we want to treat them respectfully, fairly, etc. We will strive to work with the juvenile justice system and the juvenile court towards appropriate final dispositions. Connected to that goal is ensuring that we conduct those fair, balanced, thorough, and objective investigations. I apologize for not having on this slide what is not captured on our PowerPoint at this point. Our policy provides clear definitions. This new policy provides clear definitions on different PD policy terms, more consistency on who handles school-related calls for service, as it directs that SROs should be handling the vast majority of school incidents whenever they are reasonably available. I won't always have an SRO available, but that's our goal. The policy allows for some school-related incidents to be deferred to a different time or date if an SRO is not available. Let me explain what this means. Somebody reports something to us at 7 p.m., school is closed. A patrol officer may respond to that and have to take the initial information, gain information on who might be involved. They might have to take some photographs of something. They might have to collect some evidence, but they're probably going to stop at that point because I want the SRO to come back at a different time and do the investigation. They're flat out more familiar with the process, working with school staff, how students, quite frankly, think, answer questions, etc. And our SROs go to specific training on how to talk to kids and question kids without leading them down a path. So we call it FIT training, forensic interview training, and it's specific to how to question children. You've seen it in court where you say, that's a leading question, Your Honor, I object. So that's what we're trying to avoid as well. So by having them do this at a different time, this will allow SROs to handle the majority of incidents as they are more familiar with school staff, students, and school procedures. Also within this policy, it addresses that crimes which do not occur at a school or have a direct connection to a school will be handled away from school whenever reasonably possible. What I mean by that, if we think we really have to come to the school for something that didn't originate at the school, I'll have a lieutenant contacting school staff to sit there and say, here's what we've got, can you work with us? If the answer is no, we'll accept the no and we'll work it a different way. It also emphasizes the need to communicate more effectively with all parties, allows for accountability connected to violations, yet provides flexibility with minor incidents or violations and collaboration with schools on threat assessments. Dr. V just talked about that, some of that training. All four of my, actually three of my four, one was out, were connected to that school's training that was out at Walden Grove here just recently. So I believe we've created a well-written, valuable policy that will help us take us to the next level of service for all involved. I have reviewed two other local law enforcement agencies, local ones, and their school policy is half a page and 3/4 of a page. Our policy is much more sophisticated. It is not perfect, but we'll continue to work to making it better as we move through utilization of the policy. So from half a page or 3/4 of a page to the outreach, the collaboration, etc., and now we have what we have. So our new policy is not perfect, but it's much more sophisticated than what some of our other counterparts are using. So with that, I'll be available for any questions. And Mayor, I'm not sure if you want me up here or sitting down.
You can stay there. I just had a couple came to mind that I wrote down when you were presenting. From the education of the student, perspective, the multiple hours they're in there, a couple of things that stood out to me in the policy, and maybe you could address it either whether that's part of the education portion of it or, kind of just commenting on general. One is the overall from all my years on that side, including to all the years on this side, the general disruption of a school, is it 2911 on what, during these education processes with the students, how maybe how that is either addressed or it's not, or how this policy would change. The other one that kind of leapt out off me, and I know statutorily, we can interview juveniles without the parents there, but kind of what is our philosophy on how often that would happen? I know my dad always taught me, growing up, if your interaction with a police officer, whether it's a car accident or whatever, you don't say anything until, your lawyer's present. And I've communicated that. Probably not as, I've been lucky, I've had pretty good girls, growing up, but, same thing might be. So if you could touch on those two, kind of to start on what are we teaching, along with maybe some of those other education we had chatted earlier today, about social media, what you should be not doing and not transmitting, and other types of education that goes on between the SRO and the students.
Sure. Let me talk to ARS 13-2911, which is commonly referred to as disruption of an educational institution. The title's a little bit longer than that in reality, but that's what it comes down to. We've looked at this section now, and I have people with different opinions in the police department on how that is interpreted. Law enforcement has two areas connected to statutes. One is the letter of the law, and the other is the intent of the law. So I could find somebody driving 3 miles an hour over the speed limit, and by the letter of the law, they're speeding. I do not want my officers ticketing for 3 miles an hour over the speed limit. With this particular section, people have read it differently. I've gotten a hold of one of our juvenile prosecutors, and the person said, it could be read both ways. But what we're actually looking for, and then it goes heavy to the intent of the law. So you can fulfill the elements and say it's there by the letter of the law, but they also want the intent of the law. So disruption of a educational institution is typically, now I'm painting with broad strokes here, is typically somebody does something and it forces a school to go on lockdown. Congratulations, you just made 13-2911 happen. But then there's you forced 4 kids to come out of a 4th grade period to be interviewed. Some people would interpret that as you've disrupted the educational institution. I do not see it that way. So I see it differently. It should be something much more substantial than that. If it forces us to interview 30 kids in a 30-kid classroom, we've probably interrupted the educational institution. But that would be extremely rare to occur. And what we are doing now and what our new policy says is it needs to meet both the intent of the law and the letter of the law. And while a SRO or an officer can detain for that, they do not make the arrest until they have fully briefed a lieutenant. Because, and this is the reason why it's in effect right now, because it can be read differently and viewed differently. And what I'm doing with this policy is trying to make it clear to my command staff, lieutenants and higher, if you're getting briefed on this, let's make sure we do our A+ paper. There you go, Dr. V. Our A+ paper, and say, this one passes that test. A reasonable person looks at it and goes, that's true disruption. So I hope I'm giving, connected to, I think, your first question,
Yep.
A clear enough answer for you.
Yep, no, that's clear for me. What about the interview process with parents not there? Again, I know legally, we can do that, and I probably know it depends on the situation, but if you could just touch on that as well.
Sure. So I think there's times where a parent can be present. I think there are times we would not have a parent present. There's times where school staff can be present, and there's times where we would not allow school staff to be present. It's a difficult call. We provide training to our SROs in this area, but Having somebody interviewed in front of a school staff member about a sexual assault is not going to happen while I'm chief. You don't tell somebody, and I'll be frank here, somebody is assaulted in a sexual way, somebody loses their virginity in a sexual way, and now they're having to explain it in front of a school staff member as well as an SRO who is only going to ask very limited questions because that's such a specialized interview. It's done in a different setting. It's done by different people. Not even my detectives do that. Not my SROs do that. They get the bare bones minimum, go, hey, we think this happened, and then they move it to a different type of forensic interviewer who comes in and asks it differently. So I'll use that as an example. Another example might be a threat occurred. We believe there's still a threat occurring. We're going to ask questions of the suspected student that may be incriminating. We have lots of interviews occur, and I've watched them on body cam footage. So I do not go out and look for body cam recordings to review. It's usually when an incident occurs. I said, let me see it. But I have seen where different staff members, different types of staff members at school are present, and I haven't had an issue with those. So I think the vast majority of the times, staff can be in the room. It might be connected to I'm going to call it a basic assault, because our new policy allows for a simple assault, class 3 misdemeanor. This is the two students, two youths that shoulder check each other, chest bump, start thumping somebody in the chest with a finger. They push them, but there's no injury, there's no complaint of pain, nothing like that. That's a class 3 misdemeanor, and if neither party wants something done, we simply write the report. It's not because neither party wants anything done. Both, I guess, the suspect and the victim, is not even forwarded to a prosecutor for review. So it's done. The school takes care of it as the school sees fit.
Was that new policy or was that the old policy?
This is our new policy.
What was the old policy?
I don't think we actually addressed it in the old policy. Our new policy connects it to threat of violence and actual violence. So if you commit an act of violence or threaten violence, my officers are going to enforce the law. Technically, that class 3 misdemeanor that I just talked about, that simple assault, is technically an act of violence or a threat of violence. Somebody comes up, hey, I hate you, blah, 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 and they're doing that type of thing. But there's no pain, there's no injury, etc. That happens in schools all over America, and we understand that. Kids are immature, they make decisions, and sometimes they're not the best decisions.
Does that fall under the line of bullying? I thought Arson's had a zero tolerance for bullying.
Do you want me to take that one?
Did you, sorry.
So in terms of school board policy, bullying has a very specific definition, and that definition doesn't go into simple conflict. So if this is a one-off situation of two students kind of getting in each other's faces, that doesn't constitute bullying. Bullying is repetitive, and Dr. Sparks, can you help me out with an actual definition? Because I think you know it a little bit better than I do.
Well, I think you've done a really good job separating out the difference between conflict. Children will have conflict, people will have conflict.
Good term.
Bullying requires a differential power that's long-term, persistent, and ongoing, and utilizing that differential power to influence or inflict on others.
So when do you determine it's bullying? Because on Facebook all the time, parents are complaining about my kids being bullied and the district isn't doing anything about it.
Yeah.
So at what point do you guys determine it's bullying?
So it should be determined at the district level by the administrative staff at the school site originally. Because a lot of people use the term bullying
Right.
to describe simple conflict. I'm not being mean. I'm not saying that there isn't bad things that happen under the simple conflict. It's just we use the term bullying in like vernacular very broadly. Like, oh, that kid kicked on my child, so it must be bullying. Well, in reality, I guarantee we all sat around the room for an hour together, we'd have some conflict. I mean, we disagree on things, but probably not.
No, not this side. Maybe your side, not my side.
So I think, so the administrative staff is a burden at the beginning level, especially at the onset of conflict with each other. And even the school, the teacher in the classroom is burdened or required to kind of differentiate between conflict and bullying. And I'm not saying that bullying doesn't happen, because we know that it does move through it. We have very kind of specific policies for bullying. I wish we as a society would take efforts. And I think we do as a school district are pretty consistent in how we describe things to try to help people differentiate that. Because I agree, I see lots of Facebook comments that people are, that's hard for people, especially if someone's been injured or harmed or is upset. The term bullying comes out so easily. So I think, I don't know if I answered your question, but it should be, there should be a continuation of continuity between the classroom teacher, the site administration, district administration, and ultimately law enforcement at some point if bullying becomes, if it becomes bullying at that point, it becomes beyond simple conflict.
Right, and I think that,
Kind of. My problem with the policy that you were explaining, if I'm understanding it the way I'm understanding it, might be not the right way. A simple 2-hour investigation because of the new policy now can turn into a 6-hour investigation. Now, we're always saying that we're understaffed. You know, do we have time to extend an investigation because we have to meet all these needs before police are going to step in or do what they need to do?
Thank you for the question, Council Member. I don't believe it will extend our investigations. I have now had a standard at the police department. If you walk through, you'll see signs, and yes, it's stolen from Ford Motor Company. Quality is job number one. So we'd like to do it right the first time as opposed to having somebody go out and have to correct something. So the expectation is we ask the questions, we spend the time on the incident to where we get it right the first time. And we also have a standard of what I refer to as probable cause plus.
Obviously, we're not getting it right the first time because the CF, whatever SD, is complaining and wanting us to change policy.
well, in that case, I think, Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, it wasn't, we didn't have SROs at Continental School District. It was the sheriff that does that, and it was more about, majority of their students are obviously from our town.
We're not talking about Continental, we're talking about SUSD.
So if I can, I've had a great working relationship, I would not be saying this if it wasn't true, with Dr. Valenzuela. And I believe my commanders have had the same working relationship with his number twos. We're both trying to sometimes accomplish different tasks, but we get our work done, and we, I think, cooperate with each other. I have not been pressured by SUSD to create a policy that I'm contrary to.
I thought that's why we were here, because the policy was changing.
Well, it's changing,
had
but
no
not
policy.
from a positive development way, not from a pressuring way. You know, as he talked about earlier, was reaching out to all the various stakeholders. You know, I guess the simple question would be, do you think, one, you know, all PD is on board, you know, with a policy, and the school district as well? And then I guess secondly, you know, do you think that's an advance forward?
I think the policy is an advancement forward. I think a lot of things we've been doing we've been doing that are now in the policy. I remember the initial draft, the first draft I'll call it, I sent to Dr. V and Superintendent Rico, and they responded back by email. Primarily it was more than that. Bullet point by bullet point. Yes, I understand this, we can work with this. And then there was one area where they said, we'd like to make sure we're communicating well, and I'm ad-libbing it here a little bit, Dr. V, but we want to make sure we're communicating well, that the people that need to be informed are informed, and that includes parents, etc. I believe we were doing a good job informing parents. It doesn't mean we did a perfect job informing parents. So this is where this policy, because we had no schools policy before this. We had a policy that was connected to juvenile arrests, like most agencies have, but we had no actual schools policy. So investigations and incidents on schools are a little bit different, connected to the maturity level, and quite frankly, sometimes the responsibility level that a school district has. Well, the students are en route at school and then back en route to home. So they've got certain criteria and responsibilities connected to the safety of those students. And that's where I think this policy, from my perspective, works well. It allows for clear enforcement when it's needed, and I'll have the SROs make those decisions, other than where it's a mandatory arrest, and that's my decision, connected to an act of violence or threatened violence, which is now defined in that policy. So some violence or threats of violence are more significant than others, but trying to be Solomon and trying to guess every case correctly, that's where I believe if we do our fair, balanced, thorough investigations, objective investigations, that's where the juvenile prosecutor comes in and makes the decision. The juvenile defense attorney is there. The juvenile court with the juvenile judge is there. So that's where they make those decisions. We collect information and facts, and then report those forward. So I believe we've got a good policy. I'm actually happy with the policy. Beth helped with some crafting connected to some additional awareness of trying to make officers aware of the impact they have connected to some of their actions. But I'll also state this: sometimes the enforcement action is the right thing to do. It may not be popular, but it's the correct thing to do. I have members in my staff, I have officers that I have hired that got in trouble when they were a kid more than once. I've had it happen in my family. I won't say which of my sons, but I've had it happen there. I got in trouble in school more than once when I was a juvenile. So, as did my brothers. So I come from a family of it. The idea is to be as consistent in enforcement policy as possible, as opposed to this one got arrested and this one didn't. And if you're comparing the basic apples to apples of the scenario, one turns around and goes, why did this one not get arrested and that one did? So the policy, I think, helps even that out to where there's more consistency in this area, to include the lower grade misdemeanor assault. That's the class 3 misdemeanor. That's the stuff that happens all over America. Happened to me when I was in school. Shoulder bumps, punches, that kind of stuff. But if there's no complaint of pain, there's no injury, that falls to that class 3. And I believe that's where there's discretion. If neither party wants anything is connected to prosecution, we simply write the report. The school district takes their actions, which they have authority over, and makes their decision on what type of disruption or impact that had on one student or 3 students. So.
And this refinement, in your opinion, kind of back to Debbie's question, you don't think this is going to turn a 2-hour investigation into a 6-hour investigation, do you?
We have investigations that take 6 hours at the schools. We do. Sometimes that's because we're interviewing 6 kids, right, and we're interviewing 3 staff members. The pace at which you interview a kid, if they're going to talk to us, is a different pace than it is an adult. So we have investigations that take an hour and a half. And so the goal would be, especially at this level, to get it right. But we also have investigations separate from any type of school investigation, right, a domestic violence investigation, a DUI investigation. Those take hours. And the goal behind that is quality is number one, and let's make sure we're getting it correct as best we can. It doesn't mean we're foolproof, but I believe our officers are working towards that goal of doing quality investigations, documenting it correctly and appropriately, thoroughly, because if you read the story and you've got 6 questions afterwards, what do you mean by this? We probably didn't do the best job documenting it.
Right, thanks. Diane,
and that takes time.
Thanks. You had a question, Diane? And we're not on mic, so you just have to speak up a little bit.
Okay.
don't think it can move that far.
No problem. So I seek understanding, help me.
Yes.
I used to be a child protective service worker in North Carolina, and I also was a forensic interviewer of children of all kinds of horrible sexual abuse. So, in my experience professionally, and here's where I need help, because I did read the policy, and I remember when I used to have to go do CPS investigations, and it was a complaint, say, of child abuse. And that unfortunately it was in the era where you weren't even allowed to give your kid a potch anymore because everything was child abuse and the kid was the first one calling to say, I've been abused. And meanwhile, if you go and you went and you interviewed the people involved, there's a difference between if a parent gives a kid a pop in the face because they have a fresh, disrespectful mouth, and someone that wallops them so hard that for hours and hours and hours you have the imprint of those fingers on the side of the kid's face. So in this policy, could you help me to understand how you would differentiate? Because if you get popped in the mouth, a kid could say, hey, that hurt me. So is the experience, you mentioned the experience of pain, is that experience of pain the same as a more forceful physical altercation where you actually leave bruises and it leaves marks that last for hours and hours? That's what I'm wrestling with. Because you mentioned pain, the experience of
Yes.
pain as a criteria for assault.
Yes, thank you. So I'm going by the ARS definitions. So, and this was after reaching out to one of our local prosecutors connected to this and asking, am I understanding this correctly? Am I reading this correctly? And the answer was yes, Chief, you're reading it correctly. You're understanding it the appropriate way. So there's a difference between, Councilmember, what you just described, where it's left for hours and hours. And then there's the difference when somebody leaves a visible injury and it stays for an hour. For us, we would investigate it if we see the welt mark, the hand mark on the face, or the guy, one kid says, yeah, he punched me and I got a fat lip right here. That's where he punched me and I got a little bloody lip here. So I just emphasize, I got a little bloody lip here. We look at that and we say, that would clearly be an injury. I'm stuck with what the law puts out. There are plenty of laws I have to enforce that I do not agree with personally. I wish professionally they were written differently, but I also swore, just as all of you did, I swore an oath to uphold my office, just as all my officers do. So in regards to, there's more blatant cases, and then there's less significant cases. And that's, I guess, one of the pluses to the law is one qualifies as a class 3 misdemeanor. Class 2 misdemeanor, oh, okay. Class 1 misdemeanor, oh, wow, oh, yeah, I got it. And then a class 6, 5, 4, 3, et cetera, on the felony end of it. So we're not talking right now about the aggravated assault where it's clearly, it's a beat down. Somebody just got thumped. And when I talk like that, somebody got thumped. Most people understand it. They articulate in their head their thoughts. Oh yeah, that's pretty significant. So if I give an example of really bad, people get it. And then I get an example of not so bad. Yeah, he had a bloody lip right here. He might have caught his tooth. It'll be gone in 2 days, 3 days. Less significant. The law tells us what qualifies for what. So in the case I've given you, such as the bloody lip, that's still a misdemeanor. At best, that's a class 1 misdemeanor. Our policy would allow us to make the arrest, release them by a citation. After fingerprinting, that's policy, we take them down and fingerprint them, and release them by a citation. So most people think of it as a citation or a ticket. It's technically called a notice to appear. So I hope I'm answering your question. There's the gray area in between, and that's where officers are trying to make those.
That's the position between the spirit of the law,
Mhm.
what you mentioned before, and the letter of the law, and the mindset of the person who's interpreting it. Because one person may be leaning towards the letter of the law, or another person might have more latitude and look at the spirit of the law. Help me to understand something. How, and Dr. B, do the students know about the consequences of their actions? And are they educated that if they get into a fight with somebody, and they pop someone in the mouth, or they punch them, or they slap them, or whatever happens in schools, do they know?
Well, we're educators, so our pursuit of teaching is never ending, and repetition is a variable of that retention. So I do know that through opening of the year meetings and class meetings, that those lessons are communicated. Thanks to the presence of our school resource officers and law-related education, that yes, ma'am, that is a part of the process, but it is ongoing. If I may, in regards to your comments, ma'am, and also to Councilmember Morales, I can't help but flash back, as I tell people after 35 years of doing this, to my own graduate training when I was learning to be a school leader. There was a very clear distinction. Law enforcement is law enforcement. Education is education. But they do overlap, and that's why I'm grateful that the chief's recommended thorough plan policy is, what is it, Chief? Maybe 4 pages. Not 1/2, because I think it speaks to our working relationship and also the fact that in a professional sense, you're committed to continuous improvement. You know, my favorite team is the Arizona Wildcats in college, but I am a fan of the Fighting Irishman.
Thank you very much.
And one of their former coaches, Lou Holt, said that there's no such thing as maintaining. You're either improving, or the way he said it is, or you're dying. There's no such thing as maintaining. So I applaud the chief for, and the way I see what he's doing and his team is doing, is continuing to push, continuing to grow, continuing to get better. A renowned educator who we use as part of our teacher induction program, Dr. Harry Wong, who just passed away recently, he said, schools do not suffer from lack of discipline. Schools suffer from lack of procedures and routines. So again, I think when I see this as a step at continuous improvement and in providing clarity. To me, what this does for us is, and by us, I mean us as a community, not just us as a school, is one, it gives us clarity and more clarity and consistency to something that, even with a policy, is still, to your point, ma'am, it's not cut and dry. It's not crystal clear. But at least it gives us parameters and norms under which we can operate and which officers with proper controls can have judgment and flexibility. The other thing it does is it gives checks and balances. I mean, none of us knows everything. We do the same thing when we have decisions that are more impactful, more serious, is we have protocol to consult with one another. And I think that's another thing I heard the chief is, you know, if something's rising up to something that's more serious, you have checks and balances where you consult with your command staff, with your lieutenants, so that we have as much consistency as we can possibly garner, we're as fair as we can be, and we do everything we can to get it right. I would say the same thing of commonality in regards to this comprehensive school threat assessment guideline, affectionately called the Dewey model, because it comes, that's the professor's name, they name it after themselves. He's from the University of Virginia, I think. And that's a step forward in helping us to evaluate, say, a threat. A student says something, and now we have research-based guidelines on both sides of the street together that let us assess what's the context of this situation, what's the appropriate way to handle it. So really, all of this, to me, is not us creating more work for each other, is us together getting better in our evolution of how we operate in our professionalism. So thank you, Chief, and your staff for your commitment to this process.
Thanks, Dr. V. Appreciate
Can I
it.
reiterate something he said? You know, right now, when you just said law enforcement is law enforcement and education is education, back in our days, that's what it was, because we had respect. We were raised to respect law enforcement. We were raised to respect our teachers. It was Mr. and Mrs. You know, now it's Jose and Juan. You know, my teacher Jose. It's not Mr. and Mrs. You know, parents, if law enforcement showed up at your house, your parents were going to beat you. And law enforcement was going to watch it. You know, now, you know, anybody touches my kids, the parents are down law enforcement's throat, the teacher's throat, the student's throat. So times are just totally different. It's not law enforcement is law enforcement and education is education, because we have a different generation and everything has changed. The respect isn't there anymore.
I wasn't done with my questions. Sorry. You know me, there's always more.
But that was God talking to us above when the thunder was coming. Well, he might have got tired, but.
This is voice, that is for sure. So Tom touched on something when he said, I taught my girls that if you get in trouble with the law, keep your mouth shut, right? Now, one of the things I read in that policy, because I did read the policy, and I have concerns about it. I do. I'm being frank with you. About the Miranda rights. I know there is a section in the policy because these kids could be not only arrested, but brought in and booked and fingerprinted, and in some cases charged with an actual felony, which can stay on your record and have implications for a long time and really have significant consequences in your life. So, as a parent, I would want to know about what the consequences of my kids' actions would be in the school if there was a fight and one kid slapped another or one kid punched another, because I would want to know what the process would be, and things like that they could be arrested and handcuffed and brought down to court and juvenile detention, and even as much as a felony where you know, a parent would have to get a lawyer to deal with their kid's situation. So that's why I meant, maybe I wasn't clear when I asked my question about how are parents informed, and for the kids that are old enough to understand the consequences for behavior. Hey, if you get in a fight and you sucker punch somebody or you slap them and somebody says, oh, that hurt, and it left a mark for an hour, then that kid could you could end up being arrested for that. So that's what I'm wrestling with. Do the parents understand this and they can teach their kids, hopefully, and do the kids understand it? And then the second part of that is the whole thing about the Miranda rights. So if a kid is being arrested, you have to read them their Miranda rights, correct?
Okay, so I think there's more than one question or concern in there. Let me talk to Miranda. So Miranda is required by U.S. Supreme Court case law. Believe it or not, Miranda was right here in Arizona. And with that, when somebody is arrested, past participle, past tense, and you ask them incriminating questions, you have to provide a Miranda warning. So you have to be under arrest, and the officer has to ask incriminating questions, not your date of birth and where you live. Then you get a Miranda advisement. It's a constitutional rule right now through case law. And so if we're going to ask somebody incriminating questions once they've been arrested, whether an adult or a juvenile, we have to Mirandize them. The U.S. Supreme Court has come out numerous times and said there is no one Miranda advisement. Most people here, you have the right to remain silent. Do you understand? Yes. You have the right to speak with an attorney before and during any questioning. Do you understand? Yes. If you can't afford one, one will be appointed to represent you, so forth and so on. So we break it down into the 4 elements, because there's 4 elements of Miranda, and our policy indicates it has to be done in a way that the person being questioned, or advised, I should say, of the Miranda advisement understands it. So you may not use the terminology I used if we are questioning a kid who has a capacity issue, a learning disability, is on some spectrum of a disability that doesn't allow them to process stuff that way. So our policy, I believe, addresses that. It would be the same thing as if we were questioning an adult. If I've got an adult that doesn't operate at an adult level, but they operate at a 7-year-old level, and we, for some reason, they're 30 years old and we have to ask them questions because we've arrested them or done the equivalent of an arrest, I'll let John explain that one, then we've got to Mirandize them. But it's got to be in language they understand, and they have to give an answer that is intelligible. We reasonably understood that they understood the advisement, and they say, yes, I understand it back. Every once in a while we get a and we ask a second time, do you understand? And usually they get yeah or yes. So this occurs with adults and juveniles, and the criteria is the same. It's got to be a waiver where they understood what they were being advised of, and they intelligently waived their right to have a counselor with them. It gets a little bit more complicated with this under a bunch of different scenarios, but that's what my officers are trained for. There's a lot of questions that occur without a Miranda advisement. So nobody's under arrest. Yes?
Just commenting, I think we're getting way down into the weeds. On this, we could be here till midnight. From my standpoint, as a councilman here and an interest in the town, is police chief has got this policy out there. I'd like to hear from you folks if you think it's a viable solution moving forward, and for the benefit of the community.
I was just going to ask that. Thank you, Simon. I was going to go to Janice, our acting president, if she had any, based on what you heard, from the side area.
Absolutely. And I do want to address one thing is that while the actual writing of said policy has sort of taken place in the last, say, 9-10 months, this is something that I've been aware of since I joined this board, is a sort of a best practices, policies and procedures in order which to not only utilize for, at the time, the one SRO that we had, but in the ability to grow the program. This is something that has been very, very, very asked for by not just the board, but also by the community, to sort of normalize these interactions with police, to be able to provide an educational opportunity for our students and be able to interact with law enforcement and those things. So while the actual physical writing of the policy has definitely taken place in the last 10 months, it actually has been in process, at least the mental and discussion process, for over 5 years, and I would say probably closer to 10. So just to ease the minds, this is something that we've been asking for. What I really like about this, and Chief Nolan, you've done a really good job of sort of outlining, what this is trying to do and what the reasons are for it and things like that. So in terms of, this is definitely something that we've been asking for. This is definitely something to provide consistency, to be able to provide sort of a clear written policy that not only the SROs can use, but that we know how that interaction happens with our, so that our administrators know, so that our teachers know, so that we are, and ultimately, since the SROs are providing educational opportunities to our students, so that they know, and they know how to act, and they know how to proceed in terms of these things as they get into that. This is definitely something that we're viewing as very positive. The consistency piece, I think, is really, really key to most of us, in that we strive to do that with our own policy within our board and for the school district. I do want to address a question, though, that somebody asked, and I can't remember if it was Ms. Morales or, is it Diane?
Diane.
Sorry, your name tag flipped over. I'm like, ah! So, but one of the things that was asked is as to whether or not these get integrated. And one of the things that everyone needs to know is that if a student is involved in an altercation of any kind, that generally falls under school board policy, and there is a disciplinary action that does take place that is related directly to the school. While the police department doesn't have necessarily an influence on that particular policy, because we operate with our own policies and things like that as well, but the converse to that is that if something rises to being, quote, criminal or something like that, then that's out of our jurisdiction, and then that falls under SPD. And so it's a double-edged sword, and some of you might be thinking, well, that's kind of unfair to the kid. Well, but the reality is they're dealing with you're dealing with sort of two different things. You're dealing with a behavior issue. Theoretically, you're dealing with a behavior issue that makes it to where it's not appropriate for the student to be in whatever situation that they're in at the school. But then if it rises to the level of criminal or needing some other interaction, then obviously then that turns to the local jurisdiction there as well. So did any of the other board members have anything that they want to add?
Tony?
Mr. Bruno?
So I just want to say in the world I work in, what we're doing here is strategic planning. And we haven't really come together to do that strategic planning all that much before. And as part of strategic planning, we should not be waiting 10 years. We should be reviewing the policy as we go. And I think as the school district grows, and we've seen a lot of growth, and there's more coming, it has to happen a little more often. As we grow the program and add more people, and there are more kids and more families from other areas bringing in whatever they bring with them, whatever baggage that comes here, we have to continue that planning. We have to look at what we're doing now. If there's a problem, look at how we're going to improve it, implement it, see how it works, and then continue on to upgrade that policy or that program. And so it should be a more continual process instead of a harder process, which is where I think we're at right now. And so I think it only gets better after this.
Thanks, Tony. And I go back to Dr. V in Notre Dame on the fact that you're continually moving forward or going backwards. And, this is really, to inform all of the elected officials, the policy that they're rolling out that he worked with so many people. And, we just watch it, monitor it. Obviously, there's been great communication between the school district and the chief. And, as things arise, it's not like staff doesn't talk to each other. They always talk to each other on both sides of the, and part of what this was to do was to actually show that we do work together, whether it's on fields or on SRO policies. So I think I agree with Tony that it'll be a continual refinement process, but this is where we are in this snapshot in time. And
Well, you said that you've been asking for this for 5 years. I mean, I'm kind of getting offended for my law enforcement. Were they not consistent? Were they doing a bad job?
I don't believe so, not in my opinion. I think that, and Chief Nolan recognizes this, first of all, we're dealing with individuals who have some discretionary ability to make decisions on how things are handled. You're also dealing with a situation of where situations with kids get complex really easily. And the reality of that is that the additional layer of who said what and who saw what and everything else, that adds complexity to the situation. Is anything ever going to be perfect? No. Do we expect it to be? No. Do we want to continue to move for improvement? Absolutely. I don't think that it's been, I don't think that we're looking for, what we were looking for is just the ability to have something to where we can continue to move forward and continue to grow the program as our community grows. The reality of that is that we didn't have even a second SRO until 3 or 4 years ago, and then we've been able to rapidly add the other 2. And so we have a program now. We don't have a SRO. We have an SRO program. Well, once you kind of graduate to that level of a program, you have to have some guidance for it in order to make sure that it is consistent. When you've got one person who's acting as an SRO, it's always consistent because it's always them. It's one person. We have 4 now who help each other and who work with each other and are called in to help or assist with situations on different campuses and everything else. And while each of those SROs has been assigned their own campus space for the most part, the reality is that I've seen Big Al on other campuses besides SHS. I've seen Officer Petty on other campuses besides Walden Grove. So the reality is that we're growing, and we're growing quickly. Not only the school district, but the town. And there's growing pains when you deal with the growth that I just had this conversation with a faculty member at one of the schools just in the last day. His entire teaching experience has been in well-established, well-normalized, stable programs and growth centers. He comes out here and he's gonna double his numbers in his program in about 3 years. So we're dealing with growth, and that's one of the things that I wanted to be able to address when I came onto this board is making sure that we're doing everything in our power in order which to keep up with growth. Because if you don't, then you end up dying. You're going backwards. And so that's one of the things, but I know that there's a couple of other things over here too.
Mr. Mayor, Madam President. I think I want to express from my perspective, I think I'm grateful and appreciative of Dawn, and from the town's perspective, from the administrative perspective, from the district, that there's been an effort to kind of codify structure. I'm old enough, although I did shave my white hair.
Yeah, you got much younger, a couple days.
That I come from that perspective, right? When I was in high school, I never saw a police officer on my campus ever. School dealt with it all. We do now have a much, for lots of societal reasons, there's a lot more interface between law enforcement and school settings than there used to be. And I think I'm grateful that we've been able to adapt and have an SRO program, not just an SRO, and that there's an effort to codify how the interactions are consistently applied in all settings. Like Mayor Murphy, he probably called one of my children and said, "What would you say if you were at school and an officer came in and started asking questions?" They were given a phrase. "I'm sorry, Mr. or Ma'am, but I do not answer questions without my father present. I don't want to fail the attitude test." My children were taught that from kindergarten. But I think I have a better understanding of how school systems work. I understand the probable causes or a reasonable doubt. There's the levels of how law enforcement and schools interact. How administrators have a much lower bar of finding and investigating information on a school, which most people don't realize. The schools are not held to the same standard as Chief Nolan in finding and seeking investigative material. And so I think a lot of people don't know this. What I'm grateful for is that we're at least starting that process. We're not going to solve here between SUSD and the town of Sarita the difference of opinions on whether we should be Mirandizing or talking to children without an adult being present, because that's a state federal thing that's above us. But I also am grateful that we're at least trying to codify. We will not have extended conversations with children in these circumstances, or unless these kind of things are present, because I do think that a lot of people, parents and children, don't understand always their words and the impact that it can have on their life. And I'm at the same time, I'm also grateful for the work that law enforcement does in our society. I also think it's important that we as people, as educators, we have to be careful about that. People get upset when we teach certain things. We're trying to teach people have the right to remain silent. That can be called indoctrination, right? So, but it's the law, right? So I think what I'm trying to say ultimately is, from my perspective, while I can look back on the last decade and went on the school board and go, yeah, we could handle that one better, both on our part and on law enforcement's part. And there's no negative to that. I understand that we're in we are dealing with humans and people, and I'm just grateful that we're starting this process. So, because I think there was a need. I think Ms. Reese was clear. Like, we've had this kind of, not only amongst the board, but amongst parents. Like, hey, how do you, a police officer, like in school? That most of us could say that never did. I mean, don't raise your hand, but most of us didn't ever have a police officer in our school.
We had an SRO officer.
You did. I did not. I know.
Yeah, I didn't either.
In fact, I called, my town still does, right? Recently. So, it's a new phenomenon, and I think that interaction is going to cause angst, and there's going to be people who are upset on both sides, and I'm glad that we're at least trying to address how SROs are interacting with children. And I like the example because as a child, a police officer would have never come to my school for we call fisticuffs, right? Two kids getting
A chest bump.
Huh?
A chest bump.
Chest bump, or just two kids angry at each other and we got over it. The police would have never come. It was always dealt with at the school. But that's not
Now
the
you
case.
have parents that are wanting to press charges for assault because their child was victimized.
And I agree this changed dramatically.
Right.
The school dealt with it, you got suspended, you got detention, you got whatever, but now we do have law enforcement coming. Some parents are demanding it. So I agree, but I can't fix that societal structural change, but at least we can try to make our interactions as two entities less
Confrontational.
that we know. I'm grateful that we can go to our principals and say, here's the document, and this is how you should expect to interact with law enforcement in your building. And these are the things to expect. That really gives me, sure, it's a perfect no. I guarantee we will have, every one of us probably has things about this policy. We're like, I'd like that a little bit. But at least we're in that process. And I think part of this, Mayor Murphy, I appreciate it's symbolic that as two governmental entities, right, that have responsibility for broad strokes of our society, that we're in the same room having this conversation.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for your questions. I mean, I think I'm glad you're asking them, and I'm glad that I've heard people's perspectives. So I apologize to talk
Yep.
to them.
And we can commit, it won't happen, every 10 years on there. And also, and again, working together, and just because we're not part of that conversation, it doesn't mean staff, which is really who's carrying this out on a day-to-day basis and should carry it out, really what they need from us is, this is what the direction we want to go. And then they refine it, and whether it's our budget retreat that we have, we could have, the chief reporting, to us, Dr. V, can report to you on, again, the Air Force always taught me, it's a continual refinement process, refinement doesn't happen once and you're done, and this is just the beginning of it from there. So, yes.
So I really appreciate the dialogue and discussion. I just wanted to remind the group, as was stated by Chief Nolan in his opening remarks, staff is working with staff interagency very, very well. My conversations and dialogue and discussions with Dr. Valenzuela are very productive, and we meet quite often and have even more frequent discussions. And so I think the working relationship between our two agencies is incredibly strong at the staff level, obviously very collegiate at the elected level as well. Chief Nolan mentioned something I think is really, really important. Not only had he been working on this prior to the stated concerns that rose to our attention by the Continental School District. So that's the proactive nature of our police department under the chief's leadership. But he also mentioned, and I completely endorse and agree with this, and that's policies have to be flexible and change over time. And as sure as we're sitting here, this policy will evolve as we grow as a community and as we interact and witness more complex issues. And so I think there's a lot of comfort that we can glean from knowing that a policy has to be a living document. It can't stay stagnant because our circumstances change as our agencies grow, as our community grows, and as we experience more and more complex issues.
Thanks. Yeah, appreciate it. In that, is everybody good if we, I committed to Bill that my town council meeting won't be shorter than this 2 agendized meeting on there. Thank you, Bill. Madam Clerk, item number 6.
Joint presentation and discussion regarding the intergovernmental agreement, IGA, established in 2023 between Sahuarita Unified School District, SUSD 30, and the town of Sahuarita for the shared use of Wrightson Ridge and Anza Fields.
Thanks, Devin, our Parks and Rec Director. I don't know why they don't like us. They all sat in the back row. I don't know if that's a Park and Rec kind of thing, facilities kind of thing.
It's a big crowd. Yeah.
It's like, you could have sat in the front row. I mean, you're welcome to be here, but.
Well, we had the chairs here in the middle to start.
Well, you could have started in the middle,
minute.
absolutely. Thanks for being here. Thanks again. I think we're going to hear about more good things about working together on there, so please continue.
Yeah, Mayor Murphy, members of council, members of the SUSD governing board, and leadership from both organizations. My name's Devin Stalder. I'm the Parks and Rec Director here for the town of Sahuarita. Before I introduce our 2 presenters tonight, I just wanted to take an opportunity to thank our partners at SUSD. Dr. V, you got a good team over there. Assistant Superintendent Scott Downs, talking about what we've been talking about with football references. I'll tell you one from my high school days. Do it right, do it light, do it wrong, do it long. And I'll tell you, these contracts were long, and it would have been a long, long road for us if we didn't, jump back into them. I think the easy thing to do would have been not to look at them, but I got to give kudos to Scott Downs for taking an opportunity to dig into these IGAs and really take some time to figure out if there's something better so that we can do it light. With that, there's a lot of meat and potatoes here, and I know there's going to be questions. I'm going to introduce 2 excellent employees for both the town of Sahuarita and SUSD. Dylan Pruitt, our Parks and Facilities Manager, and Ramon Andrade, the Facilities Director for SUSD.
Thanks. Now, is there a requirement to be in Park and Rec to have a beard? Is that why Dr. Sparks shaved so he wouldn't be confused? Oh, okay.
I don't know if it's a requirement, Mr. Mayor, but definitely a suggestion. Good evening, folks. As Devin said, I'm Dylan Pruitt. I'm the Parks and Facilities Manager for the town of Sahuarita. And we have Ramon here. He's going to take some slides towards the end, and we'll both be around for questions. So, the history of the IGAs between our 2 wonderful organizations. So, to the mayor's point, originally, the first IGA with Onto Trail was adopted January 25th, 2006. This included language for the joint development of the school site. So, as far as funding for the actual site development for both the school and supporting parks components there. All operations and maintenance costs in that original IGA were funded by SUSD, and it had a 50-year term. That Anza Trail IGA was then amended in October 8th, 2018, with minor changes, but mainly to remove that joint development language and to include the town on some of the operations and maintenance. For Wrightson Ridge, the first intergovernmental agreement was adopted September 25th, 2017, and included language again for joint development and funding of Wrightson Ridge School and supporting park components. Included operations and maintenance scopes for both TOS and SUSD, but the scope differed from the scope at Onza Trail. So we were both kind of responsible for different components at each of the sites. And again, a 50-year term. So when I came here 4 years ago and started at the Parks Department, the having the different IGAs not even match up and have the same scope was confusing to me. I know for speaking for Ramon as well, his team felt the same, that there was a lot of confusion there over, well, it's this way at Onto Trail and it's this way at Wrightson Ridge. It was just too confusing. So with Scott and Devin and myself and Ramon, we decided it was time that we needed to really take a hard look at these IGAs and really combine them into one document just to make everyone's lives easier and create alignment for stuff like utility billing as well, because as you'll see later, those weren't even handled the same at the 2 different sites. As well as clearly define the ownership and maintenance responsibilities between the town of Sahuarita and SUSD. So we had multiple meetings over a 1-year period. Drafts were reviewed and approved by both SUSD and Town of Sarita legal teams, and then this new IGA was successfully adopted on October 4th, 2023. So going into a little bit of more of the separation, the town's responsibilities per the new IGA is we're really operating as a landscape manager. So primarily focused on the fields components there. This was an area that, at least at these two schools, not necessarily the mowing and trimming, but some of the infield care and maintenance was an area that SUSD struggled with. So we decided we would kind of do what we do best and let these guys do what they do best and kind of work together. So currently, Town of Sarita is responsible for pretty much anything that says fields related: mowing, trimming, edging, infield care and dragging of the baseball fields, irrigation schedules, timings, repairs. And then most of these changes have resulted in operational savings for both entities. The lighting, the field lighting, we're responsible for lighting schedules and associated costs of maintenance. Restroom cleaning at both facilities. Town provides restroom cleaning during town use times, which is primarily weekends, holidays, and summer. And then we're responsible for all park-related signage. Other major changes in the IGA, we reduced the term from 50 to 10 years. Again, to I think everyone's point in the previous policy, let's be a little more flexible. We don't need to lock ourselves in for 50-year terms. We need to be a little more flexible and able to change with the times. The field light revenue, there's language in there that if there's ever a time when SUSD needs to use the lights, they are entitled for a revenue split of any of those lighting fees. And then the water billing has been now split 50-50. Between SUSD and the town, whereas before at Anza, correct me Devin, it was like over a certain dollar value, we took the difference and paid that up until that dollar value, SUSD paid the entire thing, and then at Wrightson it was split 50-50 from the get-go. So we kind of figured that's the better model to go with. It kind of saves both of us money. In that vein, to try to encourage the money savings, we'd no longer oversee the fields at Wrightson and Anza in the wintertime so that we can cut the cost of water through the winter. There are also language in the IGA for some reimbursements to the town for some items, such as irrigation repair. We're not going to nickel and dime over a head here and there, but if it's a major repair, we're going to talk reimbursement. Mainly these reimbursements came around because through the conversations with both of our legal teams, it was pretty clearly determined that anything that is attached to the grounds really belongs to SUSD. So we decided that if it's something major, we're probably going to seek reimbursement and vice versa on their end if they need. And then just adjusting town use times of facilities. Neither one of them had the exact same town use times versus school use times, so just consolidating all that language so everyone was on the same page moving forward.
Hi, my name is Ramon Andrade. I'm the facilities director for the district. Glad to be here and speak in front of you guys, helping with Devin, working with them has been great, over the last couple years, we've been doing great, sharing resources, everything throughout whatever we need to do. So we're just gonna continue ahead with the meeting. So as we see, like the SUSD responsibilities, anything attached to the properties, which is the parking lot maintenance and all the property maintenance that we have to do, like Dylan was saying that all field maintenance is through them, or all mowing grass and stuff like that. Ourselves is mainly just all the hardscape areas, like rameras, all the seating areas, playground, keeping them nice and neat, and all the sidewalks and pathways and everything, bleachers, and so forth. All the restrooms operations and repairs is done through us, so anything happens to the toilets, soap dispensers, what else, doors, and everything that happens to the building that goes through us, water and everything that goes through it. The tennis and baseball courts, we all maintenance that, like the dugouts, we make sure that they're clean and ready to be used. And now that we started all of our seasons, everything, the football fields, and paint them and stripe them, all that's done through us itself. All the signage that is unrelated to the town, well, the fence and all that stuff, we also keep clean as well. We have biannual meetings with Devin and Dylan and Scott, myself. We go through the IGAs and make sure that everything is still up to date, and we discuss any changes that we might need to do, and according to what we see throughout the year. We always willing to assist everybody. Like I know this past summer they had over here at the new building on La Villita. They needed some, floor scrubbing machines. Dylan reached out to me. We were also happy to lend out the machines that we have and, let them use it for the time that they need it. Like I said, it's always good to work with each other, keeping the good relationship going, for whatever we need, and be sure that we are in touch and working together as well. What else do we have? At the Ansa basketball court, we just did the nets, and they also help with the nets over the Rice and Ridge. We also replace all the nets as well. So like I said, that's more and more example of working together, and keeping up with this town and everything that we need also in the schools, and make sure that it's done. Any questions?
Thanks. No, I think this really just reflects what we were just discussing on the last agenda item. First of all, it's not lost on me that it's almost been 20 years since the 06 relationship was established. And it goes to, whether it was 50 years, but now we're, communicating a little bit more often, right? You just don't lock a 50-year agreement in and just disappear from each other. We all, to the president's comment, we're serving all the same community at the end of the day, and things morph and change when you have discussions and policies as growth happens and as things change. We modify, and we have ongoing, and I'm sure, there's official biannual meetings, but literally you're probably communicating almost on a daily basis, I would say, just knowing how the Park and Rec and facilities folks at SUSD work.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that's absolutely true. We literally were chatting with each other just the other day about an issue that came up. We're constantly in communication.
Right.
And that wasn't necessarily the case when I first came on. I think our relationship was actually a little contentious when we first came on because no one really understood.
Right.
It was, no, it's your job. No, it's your job.
Right. Well, that's where collaboration and communication, go a long way, right? To work together at all levels of staff, right? From this group, meeting after 10 years, to the superintendents on a regular basis, to our facilities guys, all the way down to, like you mentioned over at La Villita, have a relationship where you pick up the phone, oh gosh, we don't have floor scrubbers, and then they appear, right? And that's always been my
And to be
experience.
clear, that's not something that's covered by the IGA. That's
Right.
just a blossoming of the new relationship that we have.
Right.
And our mower went down this summer, and they offered to help mow a field while our mower
Right.
was down, so.
Well, and that's how we all should work together, and I think this is just an example of that. Thanks for, working together. Thanks for the presentation. I don't have any questions. Anybody else? Dr. V, you want to make any comments?
Just thank you for, I think, another example of the spirit of trust. The examples go on and on of how over time we've developed the ability to work together because we're intentional, like tonight, about talking, listening, really trying to understand. We have a very nicely flowing wastewater system that's been recently improved. But the reason I mention that is because Shane and I had a conversation because we had worked to develop that kind of relationship. And he said, that thing you guys have where you have to pump the stuff uphill, that's not really very good. Maybe we can help you with that. And then he and I talked, and I was like, how about if we just move to fix that? And he and I shook hands. Does that sound fair? Yeah, okay. And then you work out the details, but it all starts and ends with what Stephen Covey calls the speed of trust.
Right. Thanks. Wow, you got to follow that. Any last words?
I just echo, what Dr. Valenzuela just mentioned. It is so refreshing. I've been in this line of work for a long time, and I've been in a number of different communities. To land here in Sahuarita and to be able to help flourish these relationships for a productive outcome for the community that we're all trying to serve is really quite rewarding. And it's all made possible because these conversations happen, the collaborative work between staff, the community leaders such as you around the table. We're all just interested in making the quality of life better for the community that we serve and that we love, and it's happening today. And I really appreciate the working relationship, Dr. V. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank
I'm
you.
going to add nothing to that. Having no more further business, we're adjourned.
Thank you, brother.
Good meeting.